All right. Well, we're going to get going here. I want to take a moment and thank everybody who is joining us here today. I'm Devon Hoffman, along with my associate here, Tom Armitage. These are our pictures and contact information you see up on the screen. And we both work for SiteSeeker, and we're excited, one, to participate in this presentation today. So big shout out to Andrew and the whole Craft Beer Professionals group. It's been great to kind of meet so many new people and get so much insight and have an opportunity virtually to talk to you all. When we were trying to come up with what we wanted to cover as a topic, there were so many different ideas kind of bouncing around. We sort of leveraged what we've seen in our own personal experiences of fans of this industry in visiting breweries. And really, two of the big areas we saw need, opportunity for growth, and a lot of people looking to us for information was related to staffing and customer interaction, service, or the best ways they can get information through local SEO and topics like that. As a fan, a visitor, a hobbyist of visiting breweries, it was exciting to an extent that 2021 brought us a little bit back closer to what we sort of saw in 2019 with being able to visit and events starting back up and festivals starting back up. But some of those woes that existed last year are still really prevalent. What I've noticed in places that I've gone to visit is they are just lacking staff. And in some cases that has unfortunately affected day-to-day operation or week-to-week operation. We saw an example locally even where they just had to reduce their menu because they don't have cooks. So it's really just appetizers, there's no entrees. And that's also affected the hours they were open. And so the two actually kind of connect. And in some cases it might be an unfortunate reason, but what's really important is to make sure that you're utilizing your digital resources and tools so that you can get really good talent, but also that you're communicating properly to your customers.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't always immediately associate marketing, social media, search engine optimization in the same context as recruitment and hiring, because it's usually, for larger companies, for larger breweries, it might be different folks that are managing those efforts. And they really do go hand in hand, because if you're doing things right from a website standpoint, from a digital properties, a digital experience standpoint, it's a word that I'm trying to say more often. If you're creating a better presence for your brewery, for your brand, then there's going to be a lot more interest, a lot more demand, and it's going to make your recruitment efforts better because you've created that demand and that interest across those digital properties. So it really is very circular, and it comes back to help you when you're talking staffing and hiring, if you're doing a lot of the things right on the digital landscape.
So we're gonna dig in here, and you can see some of these top points, just like Tom touched on. How website feeds into social media, into local SEO, into local listings, and then right back to the top. We want to talk about ways to keep each of these items and locations in mind and how they'll play a role and benefit you in the long run. I'm going to go ahead and actually take this presentation off so that it makes us nice and big up here. I know that that's the most important thing today. So I'll also take a sip of my beer and then we can dig in. So if you remember what you had up there, one of the first ones was website. And if you've had an opportunity to attend one of our previous presentations or one of our webinars we were putting on last year for the brewing industry, accurate information throughout across the board was probably the one thing I touched on every single time, and I'll touch on it again today. But it's really important that you're painting the accurate picture. And on one hand, that was what we preached from a customer information standpoint, but the same goes for hirings, for applications, for employment. What we saw was places that were looking to do hirings were maybe starting with Indeed and that was it, or one organic post that had all the information in text form. That was the end of it. But what you really needed to do was have that kind of complete picture and have a place to drive people so they can continually look back. So when we say website, one thing that's really important is to build out a job opportunities page or an employment page. Even if it's not something residing in your top menu navigation, if you've got a page that you can link people to or direct people to that then has the positions that are available, more information about them. As you know, in this industry, people are looking for as much detail as can be provided. So as much information about a position, you know, what the role is, what the hours are, everything like that. And then you have the ability for them to submit an application, share their resume, and you just have a single landing location and a landing page to drive them to. Now you've really kind of cleaned it up, you've organized it, and you've got a place for these future efforts, be it in social or through different engines, you know, to drive that traffic to them.
Yeah, we always consider the website your home base, and that's why that's usually the very starting point. If we were to take on a new client, we're helping them with their marketing projects or their marketing program, because your website is really the lifeblood of all the other efforts, because you need to be driving them to a single unique place, so that way those actions can be carried out. Now, in most cases, that's going to be sales or driving customers or event attendees or requests for more information for a lot of the partners that we work with. But in this case, it ends up being applicants. That is your quote unquote your sale. You want to drive those applicants. You want to drive interest in people sending resumes or whatever that information might look like for that position. And you need to make sure that there's a process in place, so that way they can come to the website, learn about your business, learn about your brewery, they can read about the job description, and they can actually apply. And most of the time that's going to be through some sort of form. And in order to do that, you need to be using some sort of form builder or form system, so that way they can fill out the necessary fields, maybe upload a resume, upload any sorts of information that you want to be requesting for that position. And then what happens after they submit that form? They need to redirect to some sort of confirmation page. You need to promise them how long it'll be before you're getting in touch with them. That information needs to be routed to someone, whether that's the manager, the brewmaster, somebody on staff that's helping you with HR related duties. And they need to get that in real time, so that way they can begin reviewing that information and getting back to that potential candidate, so they can follow up with an interview if they're qualified, and you can go from there. It's just such a crazy time period where many businesses are in really desperate need for staffing. And what's crazy is, because of what's taken place through the pandemic and government programs and things coming back to life and places opening back up, there's such a need across this industry in particular with staffing, that the good people are getting scooped up quickly. So I think there's really something to be said about good qualified candidates that are coming in through your application process, being able to react as quickly as possible, because you're going to lose out on the good candidates, and you're going to be left with really the bad eggs who you don't want working for your brewery.
Yeah, and it really does, and that kind of leads into, you know, how do you find those good candidates? How do you find the good eggs? And one of the big things that I see, you know, and I see this through different groups, and I see this from a lot of the breweries that I just kind of follow organically. They'll put a post up and it says, we're looking for a server, cook, or even we're looking for a brewer, you know, at that level of a position, call if interested. And that's sort of the end of it. And so you're kind of bound by either the people who are following you, hoping that you're going to post a position, or that the people that are following you that know somebody that is going to be a good fit. And it's also through the lens of organic posts, you might also not even be hitting the majority of the people who are following you. We were laughing. An example I can say is I've got an aunt who tags me in every brewery post that's looking for a brewer position. It says, Devon, you love beer. You know, you'd be great for this. Trust me, I will happily drink your beer and market your beer. You do not want me brewing your beer. But it's like, that's where the reach is landing. And so one of the next steps is then saying, now, how do I use this tool? How do I use the different ways that I can boost or get my information out there in certain areas to get in front of the right people?
Social media is such a fascinating place. I think even more fascinating now than it used to be when it was really just the Wild Wild West. I think people are using it much more intentionally now. Now, there have been some disadvantages and some drawbacks over the years as these platforms and Mark Zuckerberg and all the other CEOs, they've monetized the platforms to make you have to pay more in order to be successful. So that certainly is a drawback. But the beautiful thing that's taking place is the ability to really get in front of really, really targeted people. So when we talk social media, the best place to start is really emphasizing that you can't really not carry out good social media practices and then all of a sudden one day say, hey, we need a new brewer, we need a new bartender, let me sign into Facebook and post. If you haven't built a really and cultivated a really good community and a really good follower base, then it's not really going to hit the way that you want it to hit. It's not going to land the way that you want it to land. So the strategy around using social media from a recruitment and a staffing standpoint, it really needs to be a long-term play, and it really needs to begin with treating it like an extension of your brand as a branding tool, building a community, building a following, having them become interested in what you do, in your beer, in your brand, really becoming brand loyalists, so that way they fall in love with your brewery. And now when people are, when you begin to hire and you're looking for staff members, the people that are following you are hopefully potentially interested in working for you, or they know someone that's going to be working for you. That's really step one. And then step two becomes identifying people through advertising platforms within the social media channels to get in front of the right people. So the beauty of these social media sites is really the targeting. Now, it's going to cost you money in order to leverage the advertising channels and get in front of those people. But if you're putting out your job descriptions on Indeed or Monster or local sites like in Central New York, we have Central New York Helpwanted.com. It's not a bad practice. It's definitely, you want your job descriptions on those sites, but it certainly is going to be a lot of unqualified people. For every 9 people that are unqualified, maybe 1 qualified person is going to see that, maybe even worse than that, depending on how specific the job description is that you're looking to fill. But if you're using Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn for maybe more professional positions, and you're boosting those posts or you're advertising those posts, you have the ability to be so specific on the targeting inside of those channels, from gender to, can't do gender with employment, but you can do it from an age standpoint, an education standpoint, interest and behavior standpoint, all of these different layers that you can add on top of one another, so that way you're not wasting your dollars in getting in front of the right people.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big things is when you do build out those posts and build out those targetings, because it's in some cases going to be specific to the position you're hiring for. The interests that you're going to use if you're looking for a cook is probably going to be a little bit different than if you're looking for a brewer or a server or a busser or things like that. If it's general hirings that you're looking for, it's one of those things to say, put that you have open positions, but again, to that first point of the website, try and drive them back there. And so now they've got a spot, it's got the information related to it, they can see all the positions, but now you also have the ability to check and look at the insights through tracking.
And you got to be really mindful of what those ads look like, because it just can't be something so stark and plain and dull that it's going to try and interest them around working for you. It's really got to emphasize the brand and the culture that you've worked hard to create over the years, so that way they are interested in that position. And this isn't just the ad itself. Certainly the ads themselves should really evoke some sort of emotion and interest in that position, but this is all of your social media presence. Focus on the employees and how they feel when they're working for you, what events are like, and how fun your employees have when they're doing tasting events or whatever the events that you're holding is. Have them rocking different merchandise and all the different merch they have to offer, and what types of benefits do they get if they work for you? Free swag, what's PTO look like, different professional development opportunities if they're interested in learning more about the brewing industry. There's lots of different added bonuses on top of just their weekly salary.
Yeah. And a lot of this, in getting this information out there across these different areas, your website, your social media, additional staffing sites, it obviously is going to play a benefit from helping you get people seeing these positions and ideally get qualified candidates applying and be able to fill those positions. But it also is going to kind of stem into that next point we were looking at, which is your local SEO. And that's going to feed into things like employment, but also now you're also getting into the customer side of things. Like we were talking about earlier, we saw that places had to adjust hours or change their offerings, or, and we saw a lot of changes in that field over the last 16 months, like constantly. And so it was one of those things of, was it regularly updated? Is the information that's out there accurate? And that doesn't just include employment and things like that, but also offerings and services. A real-time example, we were talking about this earlier. I went on a family vacation about 2 months ago, and I'll kind of do it by the numbers with it. We drove to Michigan, and I went to the beach with my family once. I went to the pool 0 times. I think I had dinner with my family twice, and I went to 27 breweries. So every single day, I'd wake up and I'd search right on Google, Google Maps, or just within Google, breweries near a location nearby or near me, or if I started traveling, go to certain ones. And I'm always willing to give the benefit of the doubt to breweries, because I understand, how crazy things have been. But just in that trip, just in that, 10-day experience, there were considerable number of times when I'd get to a place and it didn't even exist. It wasn't even there. Or it was the production facility and not the actual tasting room. Or in the more regular one, they were closed when they said they were open, or I waited till it said they were open and I got there and found out they had been open for 2 or 3 hours, which would have changed up my plans a little bit. And so, like I said, I'm willing to give that benefit of the doubt and, and just kind of have the, move on and try the beer when I can. But there's other people out there who are going to get upset, and it's also business that could be falling off. And so this is where it comes into the need throughout all these areas: social media, your website, all these different tools. You've got Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor. I know, brewers' opinions on it can fluctuate, but there is an importance put on beer review sites. And so to make sure that your information is up to date and accurate, and when it can be changing, when it can be ever changing, there's tools out there that you can, put some updates as they take place, and it'll populate that out there.
I think such a bad taste was left in so many people's mouths throughout 2020 because there was so much misinformation swirling about on the web. I went to 3 breweries on Saturday. I know it's not as impressive as it's 27th, but I drove a couple hours away, went to Good Nature right by Colgate University. Beer Tree is one that I've been longing to go to for quite a while. And then Ithaca, which is right by Cornell University and Ithaca College. All well-known beers in upstate New York, and even further than that. I was paranoid. Like, I checked Google. That was the first place I checked it, and like there was so many listings that were wrong last year. I'm like, maybe I should double check the website. And I even was trying to triple check a couple of them on Yelp just to make sure they're going to be open, because we're going to be driving more than 2 hours to get to some of them. So I think so many people are starting to have a distrust in those listings, and that's really unfortunate too, because they're visited and seen so often that businesses really need to put such an emphasis on them and make sure that they're continually updated so that people can find information. So you might be thinking, like, how is this related to staffing? And the answer is that all of these things are connected with one another. And that's why on the chart that we had in the beginning, we had advocacy in the middle, because what you're trying to do is really use all of these tools, all of these pieces of technology, all of these really marketing methods to try and create more interest, more demand, and build a stronger brand presence. Because what's going to be better from a recruitment standpoint? Is it going to be you trying to shove ads in somebody's face, somebody that might not even be qualified, or somebody that might not even be a good fit, and trying to generate interest out of thin air among that person to try and work for you? Or is it better to try and build this presence that you have related to your brand, trying to generate interest, trying to make it so that way somebody thinks that your brewery is so cool that they want to work for you and they seek you out? That's obviously going to be a better, just like a sale, that's going to be a better sale when they seek you out It's called an inbound technique rather than an outbound marketing technique. You want staffing to be inbound just as much as you want sales to be inbound. You want them to seek you out. So you want to make sure that your digital presence is structured and it's so efficiently built so that way they can find you whenever it's convenient for them, and that's how you can interest them around recruitment and staffing and working for you. So making sure that your website is well built, well positioned. When we talk about local SEO, it's making sure that your site is built in such a way so that way people can more easily find you in the search engines. So for a lot of the businesses that exist out there, the amount of organic traffic is a synonym for traffic coming from search engines. It's free traffic. So the amount of organic traffic coming for most businesses' site, it can be anywhere from 50 to upwards of 80%. So imagine 80% of your customers or potential candidates in this case are going to be coming to you from a Google search engine, a Yahoo, or a Bing, right? So they're only going to be able to find you and find you easily if your site and your presence is built in a way where they can easily find you. So on your website that's using title and description tags, it's making sure that there's alt tags on images. It's using good images. It's making sure that your navigation is easy to flow and people can find information appropriately. Site speed I mentioned, mobility, making sure that it's formatted and proper on a mobile platform. ADA compliance is going to be a factor pretty soon as the government and regulations crack down further on accessibility for those folks with disabilities. There's all sorts of methods, including the content that exists on your site and the keywords that you're using on the content of your site to help yourself be found more often amongst your customers and your potential candidates.
Yeah, and one of the things you touched on is interesting that I almost forgot about it thinking back to it is, how kind of all over the place things were initially last March within Google and information out there. I actually remember Google turned off reviews for a while because, and we even saw with people who kind of align with customers that are in this sort of B2C, business to consumer space, that there was negative reviews coming in because it was like, they wouldn't let me come in to the restaurant, or they wouldn't let me come into the bar. Well, you weren't allowed to go into the bar. And so there was such an inconsistency in the, validity of reviews that Google actually temporarily suspended them because it was happening so much. So it stands to like that there was, it was recognized even from the top how ever changing a lot of that was. And to Tom's points on everything related to local SEO and keywords and really optimizing on your site, a lot of times, and I can put myself in the shoes because I do this, but one of the things we try and do is put ourselves in the shoes of who our target customers would be. And so if you're trying to get more people, whether it's from an employment standpoint or just the visitors through your door standpoint, one of the questions is, what is it that they would be looking for, or what would they have in mind that's going to have me show up in a thing like Google or Yahoo, Bing, or any of the other search engines. And a lot of times, if they're not looking for you by name, which hopefully they are, to Tom's point of they're really popular, and there are ones that we know by name, but a lot of times, especially if people are traveling, they're just looking for brewery near me, or the actual name of the city or town that they're traveling to. And so if it's the city or the town that they're traveling to, how many times are you mentioned that that's where you're located? Is that just a part of your footer where it has your address? Or is it in your name? We see a lot of location-based brewery names, but if you're in that location and you're not that brewery, you're going to fall immediately because they've got that name of location recognition. And so that's just another one of those things of like, if somebody's searching for a brewery in Utica, New York, are the breweries that are located in Utica, New York, actually mentioning that that's where their location is?
It's so critical to be found via search engine. And if you're on page 2, 3, 4, you're in big trouble as far as the potential customers or potential staff members that you're missing out on because you're not able to be found as often or as prevalently as your competition. So there's a number of things that go into the Google algorithm that helps rank the listings in a particular order. We talked about some of them: keywords, content, title, and description. One of the things that Google launched recently, they only make public updates every few years or so. They're constantly making changes to their algorithm, which dictates their rankings. But every once in a while, there's something so big that they kind of release an update around it, and they publicly talk about it. And one of the things that took place just within the past year was something they called Core Vital Update, Core Vitals. And it really measures the health of your website. So it's looking at site speed, it's looking at mobility, and it's looking at really the broken links and the things that bog down your site and create a bad user experience for your website visitors. And a lot of companies we deal with, and I'm sure a lot in your industry too, they have so many things on their plate, they're worried about their product, that they put less focus on that website experience because that's secondary. But what happens is it's really deterring the site and its ability to be found more often, which ends up not allowing it to be found by customers, which affects the business in the long run. So it's worth your interest and worth your time, worth your effort to really put emphasis on your website and making sure those core web vitals and making sure the health of your website is up to speed and up to standards. On top of that update, another thing that's been talking about much more recently is local listing sites. That's part of local SEO. So local listing sites can potentially make up about 15% of the ranking factor, Google's algorithm, 15%, because it's that important. And what local listing pages are all the different listing pages that Devon started to mention: Google My Business, Facebook, Yelp, TripAdvisor, and in the brewery industry, there's a number that are specific to beer. And it's important to have a presence on these sites. It's important to make sure that the information is updated and accurate, and it's constantly changing because consumers like Devon or I shouldn't say that because we usually update these sites with accurate information, but there certainly is a lot of people out there that are submitting misinformation and wrong information and outdated information to all of your properties. Even if you've claimed your local listing sites, there's misinformation being submitted by the average everyday Joe on the street or the average everyday Joe that was in your tap room. So it's not even just good to claim those sites and have control of those sites. You need to go one step further and actually be constantly managing or constantly controlling the information that's being submitted, so that way it's up to date at all times.
Yeah, and one of the things, especially with listings, that kind of comes to mind, and it goes back to sort of the theme of this, which is just making sure that not only do you have information across all these digital areas, be it your website or the listings, but that it's accurate and up to date. And an example that kind of comes to mind, I won't say the names, and this is going pre-2020, but I can recall two examples of breweries that opened within about an hour and a half of where we're located, which I'll call the very easily willing to travel to go to a brewery range for me, that I didn't find through any of those means. So they weren't on Facebook, they didn't have a Google listing, and it really was just like a picture someone took of the sign when they were driving by that got passed around. And I found out about it, and I was like, okay, I got to check this place out. There was two of them, and they had no digital presence, so they were relying solely on word of mouth. And unfortunately, neither of those two breweries are open anymore, and it wasn't a COVID-related closure. They closed before that, and a lot of it was just people like me who are probably regularly and constantly looking, didn't know about them, didn't find out about them, and the percentage that you're just going to have the right people see and spread the word is going to end up being pretty low. But one of the things that's really important, and again, I know it's tough, and we've talked to a lot of breweries, we've taken part in other virtual events, and we've had brewers on, and they have outright said, I don't want to look at Untapped, I don't want to look at reviews, because it's not inaccurate to say that you're going to see reviews that are like, this IPA was a 1-star because I don't like IPAs. And you're going to pull your hair out and say, then why did you order it? Or they don't like any of your beers, they're a Bud drinker, and we've seen that. But reviews drive local SEO. Your reviews through local listings drive local SEO. And so, and at the same time, reviews are a very heavily weighted decision maker for consumers. And very regularly, people are willing to trust the word of a stranger over the word of a friend if they see it online. And I know even in as a beer drinker, I'd probably say if I read a review that said it wasn't good, because it was an IPA, I would say I love IPA, so I'm in it. I'm going to go try that out. There is still a number of people who are going to see a 3.5 star out of 5, cumulative review score versus something that's a 4.9, and even if there's less reviews, they're gonna choose that one. And also Google's gonna choose that one.
I know a lot of people that won't, not just breweries in particular, but won't, patronize an establishment that doesn't have over a 4.3 or 4.5 star rating. At Ithaca, there's probably a few hundred people that were there on Saturday. It was pretty busy now that college season is back in town. And I said, Devon, how many people there do you think, if they checked the reviews for Ithaca Brewing, would dismiss reviews if they happen to have a bad score because they're such beer enthusiasts that it wouldn't matter what that score was because they wanted to take a look at it? And he said probably 20-25%, which is probably an accurate guess. I would definitely say at least 75% would allow the ratings to help formulate their opinion of that place before they may have had those beers for the first time. And think about it from a staffing and recruitment standpoint. If you're rocking a 2-3 star rating out of 5 on Google, on Facebook, on Yelp, on TripAdvisor, on some of these more public non-niche type of websites, why would someone want to work for a company with a 2 out of 5 star rating? I know that some are going to be based on opinion, especially when it comes to the product itself, but it really does have an impact on the reputation for your brand, and it's going to impact folks' ability to become interested and submit that application. If you don't have good reviews, if you're not being attentive to those reviews and explaining what you can do differently in situations, if somebody didn't like the product, if somebody didn't like the experience that they had in the tap room, if it was a former employee that didn't like working there, there's all sorts of reviews that come through on these platforms. And you need to be so active in responding professionally, politely, and making sure that there's a face behind that brand name, so that way both customers and potential applicants are seeing that and hopefully can look beyond some of those ratings, some of those reviews, and see the culture of the company that you're working to create.
Yeah, I remember before joining SiteSeeker, I worked for about 10 years at the Saranac Brewery here in Utica in the gift shop side. So I got a lot of the calls when people had problems, and so kind of in the crossover from physically outreaching and calling someone to actually going online to leave the reviews, I'll agree. Like I know there were some weird ones. We had people who called and they said there was something wrong with the beer and they wanted it replaced, and I'd say, okay, how much product do you have left? And they say, well, I drank the whole case, but I'll bring the box in. I want another case because there was something wrong with it. And it was the equivalency of a 1-star review. They just wanted free product, and so, and we would address those situations and and understand that it wasn't a perfect picture. But even if somebody is leaving something, and it could be in response to their thoughts on a beer, it could be in response to their thoughts on an experience they had with you, we do recommend that you reply to them, because if people are going on, if I'm going to go and I see a 1-star review and I might think that the reasoning was kind of foolish, but if I see a response, I was like, oh, you know what, this place is willing to interact with it, and they're taking the steps. They're concerned about their image, and they're addressing.
What I also recommend too is companies that are looking to bolster their local SEO presence, bolster their reviews, and do a better job of using these digital tactics, social media and local SEO, as a means to drive candidates and applicants, is actually ask your current staff to leave reviews. Make sure that they're honest, make sure that they disclose that they're a current employee or a former employee. But if they have great things to say, there's no reason that they can't leave a review and showcase the experience that they had working for you or currently working for you. It can bolster your score. It can give candidates the ability to see firsthand what that experience was like working for your brewery. And that can do wonders, especially if you have 5, 10, 15 staff members, maybe more if you're a medium-sized or large-sized company. And that can inject a huge bump in the reviews and the quality of the reviews that exist on your platforms.
And then that's where it really from these efforts you're taking in these local listings, we'll get somebody, jazzed. We'll get them excited. They want to try it. And again, and ideally, best case scenario, there's the good ones are shining through. There's the positive beer reviews and the positive food reviews, or the just positive experience reviews. And so, if we look at those when we've talked to state associations, we've gone through specific breweries, reviews and listings, and the pictures are drivers of saying, I want to check this place out. I want to see this place. And that's where it really actually does circle back up, because you want the information inside your listing to drive people back to your site. And so I'm going to say, okay, now the information's in here. Like Tom was saying, how reliable is it? Hopefully it's very reliable, but at the same time, let me just jump on, see what types of beers they have available right now, and also validate when they're going to be open and check all that information out.
Yeah, if you're sitting here and you're thinking what Tom and Devon are saying as it relates to staffing is really no different than if we were trying to drive customers, then you're absolutely right. If you said we're looking to drive e-commerce and online sales of our merch, if we're looking to drive foot traffic to our website, we could sit here, we may have some additional ideas, but we certainly could perfectly well sit here and say, you need this formula, a really great website, you need a great social media presence, you need great local SEO, you need to ensure your local listings are accurate with good reviews. It's the same formula. All you're going to do is change out your creative and your photos and your messaging and maybe the targeting of those ads. But the formula remains the same. It doesn't matter what that action is, because that's the formula that creates a really rich, good digital experience and digital brand that really evokes advocacy for your brand and for your business and interests people, whether or not it's customers or whether or not it's applicants and potential hires.
Yeah. No, that hits the nail on the head with it. And I want to open it up for people, as I know we are running short on time here. If you've got any questions, please feel free to leave them in here and we can answer them. But if there was a takeaway that I wanted to mention or leave people with, it's kind of circling back to if you're boosting or advertising inside of a tool like Facebook, kind of understand the differences between the positions you're hiring for, and really build out an audience that you're comfortable with being who these ads are going to show up in front of. One of the low-hanging fruits is going to be location. If you're doing radius targeting, depending on where you're located, in some cases beyond 20 miles around your location might be as far as you're willing to go, but we've seen people do an entire state, and for here in New York, if you're in New York City, you don't want someone from Buffalo or even in Utica seeing your ad. It's just a wasted impression.
Never.
But you also have the ability to refine it to people who reside in versus people who visit. And so, I might visit a place 30 minutes from here, and if your radius covers it, but you might be an extra hour from there, it just, you're not maximizing your impressions. But also just understanding, the differences between your needs on if you're looking for a brewer versus a server versus a cook, because the criteria you use for a cook will be different than the criteria you use for a busser or a brewer. So it's just really making sure you're comfortable and accurate with your audience.
And it's hard to say, if you were to say, Tom, what platforms work best for recruitment. It's really impossible to say unless we know your market. Different geographies, bode better for different platforms. New York City and urban areas are certainly more up with TikTok, let's say, than rural areas, as just an example. But it more depends on the position, like you said. But you have a lot at your disposal right now. You have Facebook, Instagram, you have Twitter to a certain extent, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn, if it's a more professional or managerial type of position. You can even go to the length of going outside of those social platforms and going to Google Ads, Google Search, Google Network, YouTube. You can do Hulu and programmatic-based video ads, and you can target that locally to drive awareness and interest for your brand and for your brewery. Obviously, budget will be a big factor in that. What's your objective? What's your target audience? And what your budget? Those are the three questions you need to ask yourself to decide on what platform is best. I'll say that again. What's your objective? What's your target audience? And what's your budget? The three most important questions. But depending on how you answer those questions, that'll help determine what platforms you want to be investing dollars in and investing a presence and investing ads in, and what those ads should look like.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, from Tom and I, we just want to say thanks again to Andrew and the Craft Beer Professionals Group for putting this on. Thank you to everybody who sat in and listened. And my favorite thing to do, other than have a physical beer with someone at a bar, is to have a virtual beer with someone on my computer. So if you ever want to get in touch or connect with us, feel free to reach out. And we're always down to chat and even brainstorm a little bit and have a beer. So thanks again, everyone, and thanks, Andrew, for putting this on, and happy drinking.
Thanks, everyone.